Is the end finally in sight? All COVID rules to be dropped in England in weeks. The PM's surprise announcement even extends to scrapping the legal requirement to self-isolate. Some called it a nakedly political move to take the heat off. And for many vulnerable people, it's deeply worrying.
I would say, why is my life any less valuable than theirs? Why can't I have a life back?
It means all restrictions could be lifted a month earlier than planned. Trends on Omicron infections are encouraging. But could the move also give Boris Johnson a political booster? Possibly not. Yet another picture from a bash in Downing Street and the Met to ask 50 people about what they know about the parties. Also tonight, Truss goes to Russia. The Foreign Secretary lands in Moscow. But has her warning to Putin already scuppered her chance of a breakthrough? Abandoned by Adidas, fined by his club after the shocking cruelty to his cat. What's next for Zouma?
What we've seen was criminal behaviour, and on that account, he will have to be held accountable, and I hope that he is.
And how future winners of a Commonwealth Games medal might never have to leave their armchair.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. It is easy sometimes to be cynical. The Prime Minister is in trouble, so he's making sure there are lots of positive announcements, the argument might go. There is no doubt, though, that to millions of people, the lifting of the final coronavirus restrictions can't come soon enough. He surprised MPs by saying he aims to end them in a couple of weeks' time in England, a month ahead of schedule. Most significantly, that means the end of isolating for 5 days after a positive test. To many others, however, those who are still clinically vulnerable, that is a worrying development. It does mean that 1 year and 11 months after the first lockdown, life for most people will be back to normal.
Just look around. There's very little sign COVID restrictions even existed these days. It is unlikely, though, any of these people knowingly have COVID, because those who do still have to legally isolate. But in a surprise move, even that, in just 2 weeks' time, could change.
Provided the current encouraging trends in the data continue, it is my expectation that we will be able to end the last domestic restrictions, including the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive, a full month early, Mr. Speaker.
He will, he said, make an announcement on the 21st of February. At the moment, anyone in England who tests positive has to isolate for at least 5 days. But a drop in cases is driving the early change. Daily rates in the UK peaked at more than 270,000 in January. Today, just over 68,000 positive cases were recorded. Hospitalisations have also come down. In January, nearly 20,000 were in hospital with COVID. Now, that's just 13,500. Labour's accused the Prime Minister of trying to distract from his leadership woes. One scientist who advises the government admitted removing isolation rules hasn't been discussed at meetings with ministers.
Taking it away is likely to have some impact. It's very difficult to say exactly how much, but it's likely to have some impact. And if you think about where we are at the moment, the prevalence is really quite high. In fact, it's just about as high as it's ever been.
Juliet is one of those who will be impacted the most.
It's a life and death choice. It's literally life and death.
Her autoimmune disease means she's clinically extremely vulnerable and hasn't left her house for more than 700 days. The vaccine has had little effect on her. She's now worried she may never leave the house again.
I would say, why is my life any less valuable than theirs? Why can't I have a life back? And wearing something on your face or staying in your house when you've got a highly contagious disease is a small price to pay for society to look after the most vulnerable within it.
There's no doubt treating COVID like any other respiratory disease is a gamble, but it's one the government obviously thinks is worth taking. Emily Morgan, News at 10.
Well, around the same time as the Prime Minister suggested an early lifting of restrictions, the Daily Mirror released another leaked Downing Street party photo. It's also from the online Christmas quiz night in December 2020, which Mr Johnson has already said did not amount to a party. This one shows a bottle of bubbly, a bag of crisps and tinsel. The police, who weren't investigating that event, now are. They've drawn up a list of 50 people to ask about all of the parties.
On a day the Prime Minister was speeding to the Commons with some positive news to impart, his party hoping he might have turned a corner into some less turbulent times.
Prime Minister!
Instead, midway through Prime Minister's questions, look closely and you can see MPs looking down at their phones, like the three in the foreground here, as a new party picture was leaked. This one shows a Christmas quiz on December the 15th, 2020, an event already known about, except here's the Prime Minister with colleagues, one garlanded with tinsel and an open bottle of booze.
The photograph referred to is all over social media. Everybody can see the photo. The Prime Minister is in the photo. So can I ask him again, will he refer to the matter to the police?
Prime Minister!
Yes, that's precisely the point, Mr Speaker. It already has been. That event already has been submitted for investigation.
Some in his party are despairing at the drip of revelations.
The evidence does not look good, but we haven't seen the full evidence yet. So I maintain throughout this that I cannot and I will not defend the indefensible. What has apparently gone on is appalling, but we need to get the full evidence so we can make a decision.
The 15th of December event had been one of just 4 that Sue Gray confirmed was not being investigated by police, as opposed to the 12 that are. But tonight, the Met Police issued a statement saying that decision is now being reviewed. The Met have also given the first update on the progress of their investigation into all the parties. Called Operation Hillman, they say in the coming days questionnaires will be sent to more than 50 people, believed to have taken part in at least one of the 12 events on 8 different dates. The document will ask for an account and explanation of the recipient's participation and will have formal legal status and must be answered truthfully. Tonight, this minister confirmed on the Peston show that if the Prime Minister is fined, we will hear about it.
If there is any action taken against him by the police, then he will make that public. I'm not going to get drawn on hypotheticals as to what he would need to do in any given scenario, which of course has not come to pass. And the Prime Minister has strenuously insisted that of course he has nothing to fear from these inquiries.
In Downing Street tonight, knowing that at least 50 of his staff are about to be contacted by police, it would take a very optimistic Prime Minister to believe that really is the case. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
And Robert joins us live from his studio where he's been filming his programme, which we'll see later. So, Robert, just talk us through what we've seen today, this surprise announcement from the Prime Minister against the backdrop of clearly the pressures persisting on his leadership.
So the question is really whether this decision to end all isolation or quarantining for those who are infected is one that's driven by politics or by the health of the nation. I mean, on my show, which you can see after the news, I've interviewed John Edmonds, the member of SAGE, scientific advisor to the Prime Minister. He says SAGE hasn't even discussed this issue. There's no advice from those scientific advisors. This is the right moment to lift the restrictions. And, you know, as you just heard from Emily's little film, he thinks there could be negative consequences, more spread of this virus. On the other hand, he, accepts that it's much less severe than it was. It does, however, look to be very popular with the Prime Minister's MPs. There was a rousing cheer when he announced it. But just because it's popular with his MPs doesn't mean necessarily it's popular with the country at large. YouGov did a snap poll today and they show that 76% of us, including a majority of Tories, think actually that these restrictions, the quarantine should stay in place, actually quite a lot of them forever, but at least for the next few months. So what's going on? Well, it's all about the pressure that's on the Prime Minister over these parties. The constituency that matters most to him is his own MPs. He's hoping very much they don't force him out. An absolutely fascinating question is whether or not he gets a questionnaire from the police in the next few days asking about his attendance at a number of parties, because the police have said you won't necessarily get a fine if you get a questionnaire, but it's somewhat implied you probably would get a fine. Big question then is, if he gets a fine, will he resign? Simon Clarke, Chief Secretary at the Treasury, would not say. Goodness only knows what the Prime Minister will decide. Ruth Davidson on my show says, you know, if he breaks the law, you know, most people in those circumstances, most Prime Ministers would resign in those circumstances. OK, Robert, we shall see you later. Thank you. Well, while all that is going on, there is also the small matter of stopping war in Europe to contend with. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss flew to Moscow today to meet her Russian opposite number to try to prevent Russian troops invading Ukraine. Her message ahead of that meeting: any invasion would bring massive consequences. Well, Rachel is in Moscow and joins us now. It sounds like some of the language, Rachel, used by the Foreign Secretary ahead of her arrival hasn't necessarily guaranteed her a good reception.
Well, certainly the Russian Foreign Ministry was pretty quick to respond to it, calling it an open threat and saying that her tone needed to change if there was to be any chance of a productive outcome from tomorrow's meeting. And just have a look at the scheduling of it. Her counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, has given her just an hour, followed by the briefest of press conferences. And compare that to the 6 hours that Vladimir Putin spent talking to Emmanuel Macron, who came here talking of the shared security concerns of Russia and Europe. So that meeting, a short one. And I think in that context, the UK faces a real struggle to make an impact. And it was notable that when she arrived here onto the tarmac, Liz Truss was sporting an outfit which had quite similarities, really, with one that was worn by Margaret Thatcher in the late 80s. Now, Thatcher quickly won the respect of Mikhail Gorbachev, and yet here, over the past fortnight, state television, controlled of course by the Kremlin, has roundly mocked Boris Johnson over the Partygate scandal, a scandal that, it was dryly noted here, forced him to postpone a phone call with Vladimir Putin. Now look, this isn't the only meeting in town, not surprising given the scale of the threat to Ukraine, but it is certainly an important one, and given the mood music, yes, at least they're still talking, but it's difficult to see how this particular meeting is likely to make much of a breakthrough.
OK, Rachel, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, it isn't just British ministers, of course, who are trying to stop the worst from happening. Politicians and diplomats are crisscrossing from capital to capital, trying to persuade Russia. And it isn't only those troops just across Ukraine's borders that its people have to worry about. Russian ships are never far away. Much of Ukraine's own naval fleet is based in the city of Mariupol, around 10 miles from the area controlled by Russian separatists.
The Sea of Azov might be the shallowest in the world, but it is of profound strategic importance. We're on patrol with the Ukrainian Maritime Border Force, scouring the body of water which separates Ukraine from Russia. Beyond the horizon, the Russians are out here in force, regularly probing the capabilities of crews like this.
They are coming into observation zone, they enter our territorial waters, and we push them back.
This week, Russia sent 6 landing ships to the Black Sea, part of a significant naval buildup, which suggests this might be more than just an exercise. Video released by the Russian Ministry of Defense shows troops training for maritime combat. These images showing them practicing to storm enemy vessels are sobering for the much smaller Ukrainian Navy, to put it mildly. These Ukrainian patrols often result in incidents with their Russian opposite number, and with the Russian ship movements into the region this week, the crew are having to be ever more vigilant. This is what a Russian seaborne assault may target. The port city of Mariupol faces seaward. Its economy is forged with a heart of steel. A vast Soviet-era industrial complex dominates the skyline, but it is the simmering conflict on the city's edge which dominates the minds of the 500,000 people who live here. 7 years ago, Mariupol was pummeled by missiles fired from the Russian-backed separatist enclave right on its doorstep. 31 people died that day, including a young mother trying to shield her daughter. The little girl, Milana, lost a leg in the attack and is now a potent symbol of survival for this city living in the shadow of a conflict which may flare up again. Masha Isaeva was just a teenager when the rockets rained down around her.
It was very scary. We left the apartment for 5 months. Our district was deserted for maybe a couple of years. After that, people calmed down, but of course now everyone is worried when we hear the sound of firing.
In the countryside nearby, the Ukrainian military has done what it can to defend against advancing Russian tanks. The village of Pavlopil is close to the so-called line of contact and is often touched by violence. International observers are checking out reports of another drone attack.
Oh, really?
This is the third time Anatoly's house has been hit by separatists.
This is my property, my land, my Ukraine. I grew up here and I'm not leaving.
But despite the looming threat from sea and land, Mariupol somehow retains its joie de vivre. Its people struggling on in the face of a crisis they know could plunge this city into chaos. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Mariupol.
The West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma, who last night was picked to play for his team, has today been given the club's maximum possible fine for kicking one of his cats across his kitchen floor. He's been docked 2 weeks' pay, thought to be around £250,000. Both cats have now been taken away by the RSPCA.
From big money signing to public embarrassment, it's a dizzying descent for West Ham's star defender. The fans' verdict came first. Boos greeted his every touch last night. Then the club that judged Kurt Zouma fit to play switched sides, imposing a fine of 2 weeks' wages donated to animal charities. Still not nearly enough for some.
We're not going to let him get away with this. What we've seen was criminal behaviour. And on that account, he will have to be held accountable, and I hope that he is.
Zouma has apologised, but tonight Adidas ended his sponsorship deal, and he could yet face prosecution. That's still open to question, as is his thinking when he kicked his cat across the room, swept it from a kitchen work surface, and to much laughter aimed a shoe at it. Tonight, the RSPCA has 2 of the footballers' cats in a safe place and continues its investigation. One of West Ham's commercial partners has also pulled its support, and now fans question his future at the club.
Zouma's not the role model that we would want at the club, because I mean, for instance, there was a group of young kiddies and they were all under 16 chanting, "He kicks who he wants, Kurt Zouma, he kicks who he wants." And they were sort of laughing and joking. No, that's not funny.
Zouma claims his casual cruelty was out of character, but amplified by social media, reputations are easily ruined. John Ray, News at 10.
There was yet another appeal to the Prime Minister and Chancellor not to bring in the rise in national insurance tax due in April. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research says it will mean an extra 1 million people will be left struggling to meet the cost of living. In Parliament, Sir Keir Starmer called Mr Sunak a loan shark for wanting to claw back the £200 on offer to deal with rising energy prices.
For many, spiralling living costs are becoming a matter of survival. More and more people are turning to this food bank in Coventry, which is bracing itself for a surge in demand. Erica Gillett used to use it. She now works here, but knows her situation could easily change again.
I am very lucky to know that this place is here, and if it wasn't here, then how would we, some people feed their children? We shouldn't be in that position where you have two incomes coming into a household but yet you're still using a food bank because energy prices are going up that much, you can literally not afford to do anything.
The Bank of England's warned inflation could hit more than 7% by April. That coincides with a £693 rise to the energy price cap. To help, the government's announced a £150 council tax rebate for many households. Millions will also get a £200 energy rebate, but that one will need to be paid back over the next 5 years.
Households are going to have to fork out an extra £19 billion on their energy bills. The government is insulting people's intelligence by pretending it's giving them a discount. But it's not. It's a con.
Mr. Speaker, our plan to tackle the cost of living is faster, more efficient and more generous than anything that they have set up, Mr. Speaker.
It got heated in the House of Commons. Diane Skidmore's house, however, is always cold. She can only afford to turn the radiators on for half an hour a day.
From a bill that a year ago was 35 and now is 60, that's doubled. And that is before the latest price rise has gone on. But I'm paying twice as much. So what's happening? You know, there's something wrong here. I'm disturbed by it, to be honest, yeah.
Diane says she feels neglected by the government. For her, loans and rebates are little comfort. Yasmin Bottleby, News at 10, Coventry.
Now, it was back in 2017 that a man called Ian Stewart was found guilty of the murder of his fiancée, the children's author Helen Bailey. Her body was found in the cesspit at their home. Police also then looked into the death of his wife in 2010, blamed at the time on epilepsy. He thought he got away with that one. Today, Stewart was found guilty of her murder too, while their sons were out of the house, one at school, the other taking his driving test. He got another life sentence.
To their friends, the Stewarts were a happy family, devastated by the sudden death of mum Diane from what they thought was an epileptic fit. Today, her sons Oliver and Jamie, who were teenagers at the time, were told by a jury that it was actually their dad who killed her. Ian Stewart had lied to them for more than a decade, just as he lied to police after his eventual arrest.
Mr. Stewart, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of your late wife, Diane Stewart.
You're joking?
On Friday.
You're digging this.
Friday the 25th of June.
Well,
But these detectives have heard that one before.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Helen Bailey.
You're joking?
In 2017, Ian Stewart was convicted of murdering his fiancée, the children's author Helen Bailey. He drugged and suffocated her before hiding her body in a cesspit beneath the garage of their Hertfordshire home. Only then did detectives look again at the death of his first wife, Diane, 7 years earlier. When experts re-examined her brain, they found evidence that she too had been suffocated. The detective who led both investigations says there is more than one striking similarity.
The main one is that he is in an intimate relationship with both of those women. There were both financial rewards for Ian Stewart immediately following the death. On both occasions, he claims to have been out of the house when the event happened.
Ian Stewart told the jury that he arrived home from the supermarket to find his wife collapsed in the garden. Instead of calling an ambulance, he said he tried to resuscitate her himself before leaving again to go and get his neighbour, who was a doctor. When nobody answered, he said he went back and tried again to do CPR before eventually dialing 999.
My wife's had a fit. I think she's in the garden. She's in the garden.
Right. You need to slow down, okay? Because
she's in the garden. She's unconscious.
Their neighbour Paul remembers that day. He says he went across to the house to check if Ian was okay.
He wasn't sort of tearful. He was talking normally, rationally, but you know, muted expressions, which is I suppose what you'd expect for the circumstance. So.
But what nobody suspected was that Ian Stewart had murdered his wife Diane and that he would go on to kill again 6 years later. Chloe Keedy, News at 10.
The Charity Commission is investigating the finances of the Captain Sir Tom Moore Foundation. It comes after accounts revealed that tens of thousands of pounds of its funds had been paid to companies run by his daughter Hannah and her husband. The books also showed that nearly £250,000 was paid out in consultancy fees, far more than the £160,000 given out as grants. Now, it's not going to help with the gas bills, but over the past 12 months, British scientists have made a big advance in the production of vast amounts of safe, low-carbon energy. It's called fusion, rather than splitting atoms to create energy, which is what happens in today's nuclear power stations. Fusion entails forcing atoms together in a cloud of gas many times hotter than the centre of the sun. The burst, created in an Oxfordshire lab, only lasted for 5 seconds, but if it can be perfected, the technology has the potential to provide an entirely new source of power.
Get ready for a glimpse of the power of the sun. Nuclear fusion is how the stars make their energy. Here it is happening on Earth, a flash that could change everything.
This is the holy grail of energy. It's safe, sustainable, clean, doesn't require the wind to blow or the sun to shine, and will really solve humankind's energy needs for the next, well, for thousands of years.
The record amount of energy produced in this experiment was a huge breakthrough, the result of a decades-long international project to create a reactor in which so much heat can be generated, the building blocks of our universe combine. Current nuclear power plants rely on what's called fission, where atoms making up elements like uranium are split, emitting lots of energy and harmful radiation. A fusion reactor works completely differently. Hydrogen atoms are forced together. That process also creates lots of energy, but with much less radiation. A vastly bigger and better equipped fusion reactor has been under construction in France for years, and that's where this project will go next. But whether the technology will be ready in time to help deal with the climate emergency remains in some doubt.
Europe has a target of 2050, and we think, based on these results, it will be possible. Whether it's really going to happen, we are in the hands of the politicians. But what these results demonstrate is that from the physics point of view and from the engineering point of view, this is possible.
It may be decades yet before we heat our homes with fusion, but we are a step closer today to putting a harness on starlight. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
Well, now, finally, for many a teenager, sounds like an ideal sport. Spend all day sitting at your computer screen, then win a gold medal for video gaming. That option will, in fact, be developed at this summer's Commonwealth Games in Birmingham as a pilot event. It's known as Esports.
They call themselves athletes. Playing as a team, they even have a kit and a coach. But while their sport might be a video game, these players at Coventry College are battling another student team 100 miles away. Welcome to the competitive world of esports.
We have coaching, we have teams, we have practices, and we have the whole deal. Like throughout the week, we have a certain routine that we have to go through.
Everyone wants to be the best. Everyone's trying to be the best. And it's just you trying to prove you are.
It's time for the Face It London Major Grand Final.
But perhaps even more surprising is spectators take it seriously too. Thousands of fans filling arenas for elite competitions, and it's now prompted an esports tournament to run alongside the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham this summer. Data suggests more 16 to 24-year-olds now watch esports tournaments than traditional ones. 44% say they watch live streams of video games online. One event alone, the Global Esports Games last December, attracted 500 million views. So for some, it's about appealing to a new crowd.
I think it's showing how relevant the Commonwealth can be, and I think it will also show a new audience about what the Commonwealth Games is.
The team manager here hopes it will change people's perceptions.
it's kind of like, oh, esports, you just play games. And it's so much more than that.
It's not really sport, though, is it?
No, but the mentality absolutely falls in line with traditional sports.
This summer's event is a pilot and will be separate from the main Commonwealth Games, but if successful, esports could take their place alongside conventional ones in future. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Coventry.
That's it from News at 10 for tonight. Good night. We will see you tomorrow.